Hello, and thank you for joining us today in our study of the book of Psalms. Today we are in Psalm 13, and in this particular psalm, you have one predominant question that is going to be the overarching theme of this short 6 verse psalm, and that is how long? How long is it going to be before you step in? How long before you do something? And so let's look and see what David says here in this short psalm, and then let's pull some lessons from it. In Psalm 13, beginning in verse 1, we read, How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart daily? How long will my enemy be exalted over me? Consider and hear me, O Lord my God. Enlighten my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death, lest my enemy say, I have prevailed against him, lest those who trouble me rejoice when I am moved. But I have trusted in your mercy. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord, because he has dealt bountifully with me. As you consider this psalm, there's a couple of points that we need to make that should be reminders to us. And when you start looking at the language of what David is saying, one of the first things that somewhat jumps out is you recognize that David is in pain at this particular time. He is struggling with something, and he has been going to God in prayer concerning it, and yet he hasn't yet received a remedy for what it is that he's struggling with at this time. Notice he says in verses 1 and 2, he says, How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? And this isn't the idea that God doesn't know who he is anymore, that he has forgotten him, but rather that he has not yet answered him. He has not yet taken care of this particular issue. How long will you hide your face from me? How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart daily? How long will my enemy be exalted over me? When we are struggling and when we are in pain, we don't want to have to wait for a remedy. We don't want to have to wait for the problem to be taken care of. We want help now. And yet, even when we're dealing with God, God does not always work on our timetable, dealing with things at the time and at that moment necessarily when we want things to be taken care of. And so we wind up struggling with having patience in times of pain. Because what we see is what is going on right now. What we see is the fact that we're hurting. What we see is the problem that is right in front of us. And when we know that God has the ability to help, when we know that God is there, the hardest part is being patient and recognizing that God sees what we do not. Recognizing that God knows what is best and that God will take care of us and work accordingly. Because in the midst of our pain, we try to put ourselves in the place where we know what's best, no matter what. And that's what David, in some ways, is doing here. He is making, on the one hand, an accusation against God, even though it is an accusation out of emotion, not out of reason. It is an accusation that is intended to show his pain to God, not one that is intended to impress a demeaning of his belief in God. And so we need to understand that even here in the Psalms, there is the recognition that mankind struggles with patience when they're dealing with pain. There are many people who have said things that they would never have said otherwise under the influences of pain and suffering and deep emotion. God understands that. It doesn't mean that we have a carte blanche to be able to do whatever we want or to say whatever we want, and that just isn't going to matter. But it does mean that God understands the emotion behind it. The second thing that I want us to see in this particular text is also David doesn't just complain and make these accusations against God. He also remembers the bounty of God, the fact that God has taken care of him. In verses 5 and 6, he says, "But I have trusted in your mercy. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me." You see, on the other side of it is the fact that there is no question in David's mind as to the fact that God will take care of him. Because he says, "I have trusted in your mercy. I will rejoice in your salvation because he has dealt bountifully with me." God has always been there. God has always taken care of David. See, the question is not, will you help? But did you notice the question? The question is, how long? How long do I have to wait until you help? It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. At the same time that David's patience is struggling, his certainty on the blessings and the continuance of God being with him are still steadfast. You see, it's possible for our patience to be overcome sometimes, yet not our faith. David still trusts in God. David still believes in God. David is simply struggling with God's timetable. And there are many times when we are dealing with our own senses of frustration and fear and suffering where we can very much fall in the same category. The key is to not allow our pain to harm our faith. These are some of the things that I found in Psalm 13. I hope that they are beneficial to you, and I hope you'll take some time to think about them and study on them some more. Next time, Lord willing, we will come back and we will look at Psalm 14. And I hope that you'll join us then. But until then, have a great day.